Hello and welcome to
Wednesday's Night Out.
with your host Joseph, Turnpike Plaza 365 Rec Squad. Quotes that will change your life. A curated collection of mind-blowing wisdom edited by Russ Kick. Reality, truth, and such things. Once upon a time, I, Chung Chow, dreamt and I was a butterfly, fluttering hither and thither, to all intents and purposes, a butterfly. I was conscious only of my happiness as a butterfly, unaware that I was Chow. Soon I awakened, and there I was, veritably myself again. Now I do not know whether I was then a man dreaming I was a butterfly, or whether I am now a butterfly dreaming I am a man. Chung Chow. The Dive from Clausen's Pier by Ann Packer. Chapter 40. At the top of the Myers basement stairs, I hesitated. I could hear the dryer pounding, smell detergent and heated cotton. Mike was in his room resting, and I started down, wishing there was something to knock on. This was Mrs. Mayer's domain. She was standing at a long table, a huge basket of laundry at her feet. In front of her, everything was in neat stacks, socks sorted, shirts folded, just so. It was warm and steamy. "Excuse me," I said. She looked up and frowned a little. "Oh, hi." I continued down the stairs until I'd reached the concrete floor. "Can I talk to you about next weekend?" She pursed her lips. Memorial Day was nearly upon us. Memorial Day itself, the first anniversary of Mike's accident, but also Memorial Day weekend, which she and Mr. Mayer traditionally spent up in Door County at an annual conference put on by his office. It had been from Door County that they'd been summoned to the hospital last year, pulled off the golf course and flown down in a twin engine that belonged to one of the other VPs. I was in the emergency room waiting area when they arrived, Mr. Mayer running in ahead of her, holding his glasses to his face so they wouldn't slip off. "What about it?" she said. She reached into the basket, laid a pair of plaid boxers on the table, and folded them into a neat square. "It's already decided. I'm not going." "I know," I said, "but Mike really wants to." She frowned. "You don't have to tell me what Mike wants. I know John Jr. will be here, but that's not enough. Things can happen." "Like what?" I'd ask Mike what was holding her back, and he'd say the fact that I might drop my rattle. Wah wah. "Well, autonomic dysreflexia, dysreflexia, she snapped. You probably don't know about this, but there are a number of things, even just has even just his bladder or bowel getting too full, that can send his blood pressure through the roof really fast. People can die if they don't get the right treatment immediately. She reached into the basket again, this time picking up a strapped dress shirt of Mr. Mayer's, which she sprayed with a mister and then rolled into a ball and set aside. Are there symptoms, I said, of the blood pressure rising? She had another pair of boxers in her hand, and she sighed and set them down. What are you getting at, Carrie? I'd like to stay for the weekend so you can go. I'll come on Friday and stay till you get back Tuesday morning. You can tell me everything I need to know. I'll be responsible. Her mouth tightened. I want to do it, I said. You can hate me for the rest of your life, but that doesn't change the fact that I am here now. I am back, and I want to be part of Mike's life, and I'm going to be. Carrie Bell, she said. Well, well, she smiled a little. Mr. Mayor does want me to go. Then go, I said. Don't you want to? Spend a weekend away? Go acquainting. Go adequate. Have a martini on Saturday night. You always love going. She patted her hair and looked down for a moment, her hand at her chin. John Jr. can do the catheter, she said. I went over on the Friday afternoon. I baked a meatloaf Mrs. Mayer had left and put out a salad that was already in the bowl and needed only to be dressed. John had a friend over, and the four of us ate in the kitchen. The little countertop TV tuned to a baseball game on ESPN. John was already deep in training for his senior year hockey season, and he had 3 helpings of meatloaf and at least a quart of milk. That's rude, his friend said when John found a container of cottage cheese in the refrigerator and spooned a large mound onto his plate. He's growing, Mike said, and he gave me a big grin from across the table. After dinner, John and his friend went out. I cleaned up and then joined Mike in the living room. What do we do? What do we do? He said, rent a video. I'm white, but you can go get one. I opened my mouth to protest that I didn't want to leave him, and he gave me a look. Just go. I drove as fast as I could, grabbed something I could have had said the title of 2 minutes later, and hurried back. It wasn't until I'd parked that I could get myself to slow down. I didn't want to be like Mrs. Mayer. Saturday morning, after breakfast, we sat in the kitchen waiting for the doorbell. Mike's attendant was due to arrive at 9 to help him shower and go to the bathroom, administer his BP. As Miss Mayer said, his bowel program. It involved rubber gloves, lubricating jelly. Mike wouldn't let anyone in his family do it. I sat on the deck while they were busy. Finally, he wheeled outside, his hair still wet, a sheepish smile on his lips. Remember when BP stood for beautiful people? He said. The times they have changed. We got into the van and drove over to the state capitol, the farmers market at the end of May. There were tender lettuces, spears, and rhubarb, tiny carrots, and potatoes. We joined the crowd circling the stands. I bought some potted herbs and a jar of honey for my mother. A farm wife with worn out fingers sold us a massive bear claw, and I tore off little bits and fed them to Mike. Then licked the almondy crumbs from my fingertips. Green apples, big purple bulbs of garlic. It was still too early for sour grapes. Back at home, Mike was exhausted. A simple excursion could do him in. He took a nap while I worked on dinner. Chicken stew with dumplings from Mrs. Mayer's recipe box. We ate early and then went for a walk. The sky was hazy, colorless. We passed people working in their gardens. They might not actually know each other, but they understood who each other was. Turning back toward the mayor's, we came upon a man playing catch with a little girl. On his back, there was a baby in a backpack who laughed a toothless little laugh every time he caught the ball. When we got back, we could hear the shower running upstairs. John's voice hitting the high notes of the Sears jingle from TV. He came downstairs a little later with his hair blown dry. Hot date? I said. He looked so much like Mike at 17. Rangy but broad-shouldered, the same thin face. Yeah, where are you going? Mike said. Joan grinned. I think John might be a lady killer, Mike told me. It's all in the Z, John said. He meant the 280Z, the car Mr. Mayer had handed down to Mike. John drove it now. Don't sell yourself short, Mike said. That cologne you're wearing counts too. I suppressed a smile. John smelled a little like a drugstore. Hey, that's my personal musk, John said. Mike rolled back a few feet. The hell it is. Sunday we went over to Rooster and Jones. She called him Doug, which no one had called him in all the years I'd known him. Doug, hon, would you put some Doritos in a bowl and bring them out? Rooster liked it. Being called Doug, being called hon, putting Doritos in a bowl. Before we left, he led us into the second bedroom and showed us a little wooden cradle he'd already made, painted white with a bunny decal at one end. Monday was Memorial Day. We hadn't made plans, and I woke early, impelled to come up with some activity, shopping, a park, a movie, something to get us past the middle of the day. Mike had other ideas. After his attendant left, he rolled into the kitchen where I was cleaning up and said casually, as you please, that he wanted to drive up to Clausen's reservoir. He watched me nonchalantly, waiting for my response. My heart pounded. How could he go and not come back a little more broken? How could I? He sat there in his chair, face still pink from his shower, his mustache newly trimmed. He'd been waiting for this. I understood for a long time. there was a lot of traffic. We drove past farms and small clusters of houses, interchanges where narrow roads ran to rural towns. There was a holiday countdown on the radio, but with a new spin. Out of order, it was called, with the songs played out of order. How dumb is that? Mike said. The parking lot at the reservoir was crowded. Lots of jeeps and motorcycles full wheels, as Mike and Rooster had always said. I pulled into a handicapped spot and cut the engine. Out the window, I looked at the hill that hid the water from view, grassy and choked with Queen Anne's lace. What do you want to do? I said. The path up the hill was narrow and rocky. It was not accessible. Get out at least. I got down and went around to help him. All around us there were kids skateboarding, whole rollerblading, families, guys showing off their muscular, oiled bodies to girls wearing bathing suits you could carry in a Band-Aid box. Remember, Mr. Finro, I said. Finro had taught the one class we took together senior year of high school, family life. Yeah, I reached into the van for his hat and settled it on his head so the brim shaded his face. He wasn't supposed to get sunburned. Remember what he said to Mimi Baldwin that time? He wrinkled his nose. I'm not sure. There was that camping trip he organized for seniors. Come to think of it, I don't think it ever happened our year. But in class one day, when he was trying to get people to sign up, she asked if we were supposed to bring bathing suits. And he said, that should be easy enough. 2 Band-Aids and a quart. Mike snorted. Guess why it never happened? He pushed the lever of his chair and began to move forward. Well, get a pop, he said. Then we can go. The refreshment stand was at the far side of the parking lot. By the time we got there, Mike was sweating. He looked unwell. Nearby, there were several picnic tables under corrugated plastic shelters, and I got him to go wait at one. I took my place in line and glanced back at him, thinking he looked impossibly vulnerable. Spastic legs sprouting awkwardly from the loose shorts. 2 women came to stand behind me, and after a while, I realized they were talking about him. He looks really hot, one of them said. Poor thing, said the other. It seems like he'd be a lot more comfortable if he'd stayed home. I turned around and looked at them. Women in their late 30s in wide-strapped bathing suits topped by syringes so their legs wouldn't show. I said, don't you mean you'd be more comfortable if he'd stayed home? They gave each other horrified looks. I'm so sorry, said the first one. Is he with you? Said the second one. No, I'm with him. I felt sweaty and irritable as I carried our sodas to the table. We drank them under the bright shade of the plastic shelter, neither of us saying much. When we were done, Mike asked me to get some hot dogs, and I stood in line again, thinking he didn't want the dogs so much as he wasn't ready to leave. Finally, we started back toward the van. When we arrived at the path over the hill, Mike stopped. He wheeled around so he could look at me. The helicopter landed right there, I said, pointing at the clear space where the road led into the parking lot. You were still on the pier where Rooster pulled you up. I stared at the space, thinking back. It took 28 minutes from the time the woman at the snack bar placed the call. The helicopter dropped from the sky with a huge racket, its blades ratcheting around and around. Standing there by Mike, I remembered how it had seemed to bounce as it landed. I remembered Rooster running to meet the paramedics. I remembered Jamie hand in mine. What were you thinking? Mike said. That it was my fault. That if I hadn't been mad at you, I would have kept you from diving. Oh, Carrie, he said. Oh, Mike. Oh, everyone. That evening we watched TV. The house was dark, but for a single lamp near where we sat, me on the living room couch and Mike just to my side. John was out again, and the mayors weren't due back until morning. Mike fell asleep shortly after 9. His head slumped forward. When he woke a little later, he was embarrassed. One thing he couldn't do was get in and out of his clothes by himself. He could do the top, but not the bottom. Lower extremity dressing. As they said in occupational therapy, actually he could, but it took about an hour. We went into his room and I unbuttoned his shirt. He got it off and transferred onto his bed. There I eased the shorts down, rolled him from side to side to get them off. All set, I said. He slept in his underwear, the catheter tube running down his leg to the collection bag. Yeah, I'm fine. I was wondering, though. He hesitated. Would you go put your pajamas on and come sit with me? Just like a proper slumber party for our last night? I went up to Julie's room. Where I was staying. I had brought a short flowered nightgown, a giant t-shirt, really, and I got undressed and put it on. I tapped lightly on the door as I went back into his room. I sat in the armchair near his bed. Outside, a car zoomed by, the sudden radio, and then quiet. Teenagers, maybe even John. Remember cruising, he said. What was the point anyway? Was it drinking? It was its own point. In the hall, Miss Mayer's grandfather clock struck 10. I looked at Mike lying there with the head of his bed elevated, his arms half bent. He turned his head so he could see me. If I asked you to do something, would you do it? What? He looked embarrassed. I wish you'd take your nightgown off. I want to see something. I felt unsteady for a moment, blood rushing to my face. I wanted to look away, but didn't. He stared into my eyes. Nothing you haven't seen before, I said, but he didn't smile. Please, I stood up. He watched soberly from the bed, a little furrow in his forehead. I reached for the hem of my nightgown. It wasn't cold, but my arms were covered with goosebumps, and I hesitated, not wanting to go on. At last, I pulled the nightgown over my head and dropped it on the chair behind me. I was in my underwear. I crossed my arms over my breast and then let them fall again. My nipples puckered. I didn't know what to do with my hands, how to hold them. I clasped them together in front of me, then wiped them against my thighs to dry them. Mike stared, just stared, absolutely nothing visible on his face but the subtlest tightening of his chin. I feel a little weird, I said at last, and he sighed and looked away. It's okay, he said. I'm sorry you can get dressed again. I felt nothing. That's what I wanted to know, and I felt nothing. I pulled the nightgown back over my head. Nothing. To have your sexual self frozen, locked away. It was almost earlier to imagine my limbs without motion. Arousal was so involuntary. You couldn't force it on yourself. It just arrived, crept up, or burst in. And then one day it didn't. I thought of nights in my apartment, Mike slipping between my thighs, the little moan he made when he came. He was staring at the wall. After a while, he lowered the head of his bed until he was flat on his back. There, he said. I went over to the side of the bed. He met my eyes with his, then looked away. It was a narrow bed, perhaps a little wider than a regulation twin. Can I sit here for a minute? I said. Yeah. I sat down. The blanket scratched the backs of my legs, and I shifted my weight and pulled my nightgown further under me. The overhead was blazing. My back was to him, and I twisted part way around so that my thigh lay parallel to his body, and I could look back and see his face across the room. The poster of Lake Mendota hung in its silvery frame. It had been photographed from somewhere near the Union Picnic Point, curving in from the left. I closed my eyes and tried to remember our little place there, the room made by trees where we first made love. He coughed. Are you comfortable? I said. Should I go upstairs now? No, stay, he said. Stay with me a little longer. I nodded. The night was so quiet I could hear the faint thumb of a moth lighting on the window screen. There, Mike said, and he lay there, and I sat. The Dive from Clausen's Pier by Ann Packer. Turnpike Plaza, 365, Rec Squad.